Greetings, citizens, and thanks for tuning in to the Nindie Nation podcast, your weekly source for all things independently developed for the Nintendo Switch. I'm Jeff, and today on episode 52, we've got a smorgasbord of brand new indie games to put to the Nindie Nation sniff test. After we've figured out which are worth your time, we'll take a digital stroll down to Nintendo's eShop to see which deals on tap this week will help you stretch that digital dollar the farthest. And if, while you're hearing that, you're thinking to yourself, it sure would be nice to see footage of the games he's talking about, well then you're in luck, because if you head on over to the Nindie Nation YouTube channel, you'll find a video version of each episode complete with gameplay footage and trailers, as well as Let's Plays and other video series focused on digging a little deeper into the Nindies we love. And for all other things Nintendo related, we turn to the Nintendo Village for daily breakdowns on the newest games, reviews of the biggest releases, and other weekly shows. You can check it all out at thenintendovillage.com. As you know, every week we kick things off by looking at which indie games hit the eShop since our last recording, which happens because in the wild west of independent game development, sometimes people forget to actually tell Nintendo about their upcoming titles, and the amount of titles this week are staggering. So we're gonna go straight to highlighting some of the noteworthy Nindies and try to blow through the rest. Without further ado, here's what launched on the eShop since last week's episode. Starting with an entry in a franchise I unexpectedly fell in love with a few years ago on the 3DS. Puzzle & Dragons Gold is an extremely popular puzzle game in Japan that has you using a touchscreen to rearrange colors to eliminate rows or shapes off the screen. It sounds simple, but it is very active and requires constant quick thinking. The developer Gung Ho Online was involved with the 3DS title that included a Mario version, but I found the RPG battles that played out alongside the core Puzzles & Dragons game to be a great time. I think this one has a demo and really recommend you check it out if so. There's sure to be plenty to work through here, and the asking price is a very reasonable $9.99. Witch and Hero 2 is a sequel to what turned out to be a fairly decent top-down action RPG in a retro 8-bit style about balancing the strengths and weaknesses of your two main characters, the titular Witch and Hero. The original isn't going to set the world on fire, but Fly High Works did a serviceable job with this simple $5 throwback. Bumpy Trail Games released Without Escape, a first-person horror game built like an escape room challenge with creepy PlayStation-era visuals and even included full-motion video cutscenes for good measure. You can check out this peek into 90s gaming horror for only $3.99. And you can file this next one under "There has to be people who understand what this is," right? Because I get a headache even looking at the logo for Crayon Shin-chan, the storm called Flaming Kasukabe Runner. What? Despite that, this side-scrolling auto runner by Bushiroad doesn't look half bad. I'm pretty sure it was built as a free-to-play mobile game, so I'm not going to suggest that you shell out $10 for the privilege of playing this, but I like the RPG mechanics as a nice addition to a well-traveled genre. I'll throw this on the wish list and wait for it to be a buck or two. Developed by The Station, a game by the exact same name released this week in a specific type of genre that we sure are starting to see frequently. You know, the whole you're a scientist and you're exploring a derelict space station to unravel some big mystery, that kind of thing. Yeah, The Station is one of those, and it's $10. Robots Under Attack is a $6 puzzle game by Dimitro Darabas that has you firing arrows through physics-filled obstacle courses to take out robots. And the whole thing is made to look like a kid drew it with pencil on graph paper. It's pretty cool, but it definitely looks like it was built with a smartphone and quick mindless play sessions in mind. Starsign and Sims released a totally by-the-book sci-fi twin-stick shooter and called it Dungeon Shooter. It's like they're not even trying here. And I suspect that their $5 throwaway will soon, unfortunately, fade away into a sea of bland and lazy contemporaries. And speaking of lazy-looking games that share their description with 20% of the eShop, Blue Sunset Games has released the sci-fi tower defense title Planetary Defense Force, where the action takes place on a big sphere with lots of lasers trying to take out your base. If you want, you can take a shot at defending it for $3.49. And reaching way into Netflix, grabbing every single piece of the tone from Stranger Things, Devolver Digital brings us Stories Untold by No Code, which promises various gameplay styles wrapped up into one adventure title of, quote, 4 stories, 1 nightmare, end quote. And it's all yours for $9.99. On Skull Games takes a slightly different approach in their first-person adventure Curious Cases, which launched for $4.99, and this one has you playing as world-renowned detective Thomas More as he chases 3 mysterious cases that nobody else could crack. Can you crack the case? Where Angels Cry, Tears of the Fallen Collector's Edition is, other than quite the dramatic-sounding mouthful, an adventure game set in 13th century medieval Europe where you play through a bunch of mini-games as a secret agent for the Vatican. The engrossing gameplay includes finding hidden objects, Simon Says memory games, and other stuff that you'd see at a rundown bar on the video poker machine. I can't imagine Kataya Games really thinks anyone will pay $20 for this game. I just have to assume this is one that will get marked down to 9 cents before too long. And finally, wrapping up the list of forgotten before they arrived indie games is Extreme Trucks Simulator, which I could have sworn we've looked at least the last 6 weeks in a row. So take a PC from 20 years ago, throw in a bunch of bulldozers, excavators, and wrecking balls, plop down a construction site map from, I don't know, Duke Nukem 3D, and bam! There's your game for suckers like me who have little kids that love these construction vehicles. Slap a cheap price on it like, wait, $15? $15? No thank you, Ovilex Soft. No thank you, sir. But hey, Puzzle & Dragons is a cool game I can vouch for. And I have to note, remember last week when I learned that the new Vertex Pop game Super Crush KO was releasing? You know, they're the same team behind Graceful Explosion Machine. Well, it released today, the day I'm recording this, and so far it is everything I could have hoped for, so please check that game out. I also picked up last week's Squidlet, developed as a $2 game that could theoretically run on the original Game Boy, so there's plenty of stuff that just released that's worth your digital dollar. I'm already working on videos for both of those titles. Even from this week, that crazy-ass runner game and Witch and Hero 2 both piqued my interest, and as always, if you want a point-and-click adventure game, there are more than enough out here. Just, you know, wait for a sale on most of those. But don't fret just yet. I'm optimistic about this week. We're starting to see the release of a couple games featured in the last couple Nintendo Indie World presentations. And as I said last week, the eShop is back with a vengeance, rocking 24 new titles from January 17th through the 23rd, with just about every kind of tone and type that you could ask for, not to mention an absolute shitload of games on the 23rd. So just as you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time, let's check out what's coming to the eShop in the week ahead. Kicking off the week on January 17th, Ratalaika Games publishes Redbow, a spooky 8-bit horror game, which we actually don't see too many of, and it has absolutely nightmare-inducing artwork. If you want to try and save a little girl in a house filled with all kinds of horrors, by all means, plunk down your $5 and get to it. And instead of releasing a new themed pinball table for $2 like they usually do every other week, Superpower Games has decided to bundle 3 of them together in what they call the Adventure Pinball Bundle. However, they want $8.99 for the 3 tables, and they don't seem to add anything else, so I'm guessing they're just making this SKU so that they can mark it down later. For now, don't buy this for any price above maybe $1 or $2. Well, probably don't buy it at all. Zen Pinball and Pinball FX are the good pinball games, and of course there's also the recent Demon's Tilt if you're looking for some high-quality pinball action. And this next title will I mean, it'll make you feel like crap. Lydia is one depressing yet unfortunately true story by Finnish studio Platonic Partnership, and they're using this game to raise awareness and donations in the name of their $4 game. Lydia is about a 1-hour-long adventure exploring the memories of a girl who grew up in a household with drunk, abusive parents, and is said to be a great thought-provoking title if, you're willing to take a, quote, punch in the gut. I'm not one to play games that are trying to depress or awaken me into awful things, but hey, sometimes this kind of stuff can be a coping mechanism for a lot of gamers out there, and I guess there's something out there for everyone. And now flipping the script entirely is So Many Me Extended Edition by Starcaster Games, a puzzle platformer with very charming graphics that remind me of the more colorful segments of a SteamWorld game. So Many Me is a tale about a little blob trying to save the world from a malevolent evil by cloning himself into a lot of little blobs. This version includes 2 previously additional DLC expansions and is all bundled up for $14.99. And brought to us by an unknown developer, apparently, Spider Solitaire is a solitaire game for your Switch, and it costs $9. Moving on to January 21st, we get what could be a pretty exciting new RPG for fans of classic PC RPGs. Infusion has been working on this game for 10 years and are finally releasing Ember, which calls back to the great Blizzard and Dungeons & Dragons based PC RPGs of the 90s. Ember looks massive and gorgeous with skill trees, classes, multiple diverse environments, and a quest to restore light back to the world. If you're a fan of games like Planescape, Pillars of Eternity, or Baldur's Gate, Ember certainly seems like a game you should check out. And even with all of that content, that level of polish, and 30 plus hours in the main quest, Ember launches at a discounted price of only $14.99. And speaking of the 90s, there was a time then when, for some reason, 2D action platformers featuring cavemen were a really big thing. We had games like Chuck Rock on the Genesis and the Joe and Max series on the Super Nintendo. I never really understood why Caveman game became its own mini-genre, but here we are again with Caveman Chuck by Prime Bit Games, featuring a cartoonish world with expressive dinosaurs just like you'd see in Bonk or Adventure Island. You can run, jump, and club your way through a traditional side-scroller for only $4. Raylight Games and Creo Team are releasing Soccer Tactics and Glory for a whopping $40 on January 22nd. And as you'd expect, you do all of the management stuff as you'd see in any of these sports management sims. But what I think looks pretty fun about this one is that the actual games of soccer take place in a turn-based format with a soccer field that's overlaid with a grid. Like, really. It looks like a soccer RPG, and it's turn-based. I have a feeling that the $40 price tag is probably gonna sink this game, but otherwise, I'm curious to see how that RPG-like approach to a usually fast-paced sport would actually play out. The reviews do look very positive, so it sounds like the game is well received. If you're a soccer fan, check this one out because Soccer Tactics and Glory seems to be doing something quite different to separate itself from the sports team management pack. And it's time to move on to the big weekly Thursday drop on January 23rd, and we've got a whopping 14 games today alone. And we're going to start with one that was featured in a recent Nintendo Direct and has the potential to be awesome. 1980X, or 198X, by newcomers Hybit Studios, tells a coming-of-age story about a kid living in the 1980s suburban America whose only respite from the world is his local arcade. When you venture into the arcade, though, the gameplay then turns into whatever that cabinet happens to be. And with lovingly reimagined versions of games like Shinobi, Streets of Rage, Outrun, Gradius, and quite a few more classic arcade and Genesis-style games, even going so far as to include first-person dungeon crawlers on the kid's PC at home. And on top of that lineup, each one of these titles looks to be painstakingly developed by people who really know and care about what they're referencing. I can't wait to try out 1980X, and if you're a fan of this type of arcade game, or the classics from the Sega Genesis, or just gaming in that era in general, this one is definitely worth a shot. 1980X launches for only $10, which I don't know how fleshed out all of these arcades are, but to me, it seems like a much lower price than I would have expected, especially given the variety of games that are built in. If you're trying out 1980X, hit me up on Twitter at Nindie Nation and let me know what you think. I'm also going to try to pick it up this week and we'll post my impressions as well. We haven't seen anything by publisher Bad Seed before, but their first game, Sleep Attack, brings a vividly colored and uniquely twisted approach to tower defense for $6.99. And yes, that was a much intended pun because what makes Sleep Attack different is the ability to actually twist the level or rotate the various planes that your towers and enemies are approaching on. With a nice level of polish and a pretty interesting new mechanic, Sleep Attack could be a nice addition for tower defense fans. Speaking of sleep, the creators of Among the Sleep, Kilbright, have their follow-up to that dark, melancholy adventure game with Mosaic, another title that has seen some love in a recent Nintendo Direct presentation. Focused on a dark, somber world, you play as an average Joe just going about his monotonous life who suddenly starts to experience bizarre, otherworldly events and then tries to figure out what is going on in his world. At $20, Mosaic is right within the wheelhouse of other high-quality puzzle adventures, and it includes all of the necessary components of a solid follow-up to Kilbright's beloved debut title. This one is probably going to be good. We may be on the verge of a Nindie Nation alert, friends. It's been a while, but it appears we could have a new challenger entering the shovelware arena with Crazy Soft. Their first title on the Switch this week is Crazy Snake Adventures, and it takes the original Snake game, the one that gained popularity on Nokia phones from over 20 years ago. Yeah, it takes that, throws a fresh coat of paint on it, and a $9 price tag, and sets off to see how many copies they can sell based on nostalgia alone. I've got my eye on you, Crazy Soft. Forever Entertainment's weekly release is a new point-and-click / visual novel title that draws inspiration from Snatcher and Rise of the Dragon. Sinless also takes place in a similar cyberpunk world ruled by an evil corporation and is available on January 23rd for $9.99. Developer HeroCraft takes their own stab at the Warhammer 40,000 franchise with Space Wolf, a previously released turn-based strategy game from the PC that comes to the Switch with a bunch of DLC for $16. I don't really know anything about this franchise other than I had a friend who was always building and painting the little action figures, but the game looks really good. I would assume if you're into this franchise that Space Wolf would probably be a safe bet for a good take on the Warhammer franchise, but I don't know what I'm talking about. This one's interesting. Double Dutch Games releases Speedrunners, which is published by TinyBuild, who has a pretty solid reputation, and this game looks exactly like Runbow. The only catch is that every character has a grappling hook that allows them, obviously, more options for movement, as they race against the other players to the finish line of the side-scrolling obstacle course, just like in Runbow. Even the UI and the art style looks the exact same, which is kind of infuriating, but maybe they have some kind of partnership with 13AM Games, who originally developed Runbow, and I think also released it through the same publisher. It's very odd. At $11.99, my recommendation is to stick with Runbow, which is usually on sale for less than that. But if the reviews end up looking pretty solid, or you've already played Runbow to death, maybe Speedrunners is worth it as a way to get more out of that gameplay you already know and love. Escape from Chernobyl is a game by Atypical Games that has been generating a lot of buzz recently. I'm not sure if it's the marketing campaigns, the recent HBO miniseries that's also based on the nuclear disaster of 1986, or the gameplay that is very reminiscent of Fallout 3, but, for $10. Either way, it looks like a solid option for a spooky trip through the fictional, zombie mutant-ridden world of a real-life disaster. Oddworld Stranger's Wrath HD is a port of a re-release of an upscaled remake of the game from the same name that was originally released on the first Xbox. You got that? Unlike other entries which focus on platforming or third-person adventuring, Stranger's Wrath is the Oddworld inhabitants' attempt at a much more action-based first-person shooter. This is actually the only title in the franchise that I've never played, despite its many releases. But it does have a cult following, and it received a good amount of airtime during last month's Indie World presentation. The Switch is quite possibly the last modern console to receive this game, and launching at the price of $30 for what's essentially a remake of a remake of a remake seems pretty steep, so I might wait for a sale. But for those of you who just love Lorne Lanning and his bizarre but oddly charming franchise, well, you can finally get your hands on this entry in the Oddworld saga. I don't know if it's Do or D-O, but that's a developer that I've never heard of. Their game, Dual Brain Volume 2, is easy to understand if you've played Nintendo's own Brain Age, or of course the slew of copycat titles that released in its wake. It's hard to recommend this game even if you're a fan of these brain-teasing minigames, because any day now, the US will receive the brand new Brain Age title that's already out in other countries around the world. Especially for that reason, and being a $15 copycat game from an unknown developer, I'm gonna say skip Dual Brain Volume 2 and find another way to train your brain. Poo Pai Po is a side-scrolling space shooter with a serious Japanese cartoon visual style by another unknown developer called Bowl Hut. It lacks a level of polish that we typically see from other games in this genre, but it's only $4, so if you just have to buy a shmup this week, this could be a reason enough to buy Poo Pai Po, and just also so you can say that. Jewel Rush is a $10 release by Tom Create that combines anime storytelling with some kind of 4-player party game about running around and collecting jewels, but the visuals are so vivid and so distracting that I can't imagine playing this game without getting an immediate migraine. And fans of sci-fi or paranormal shows such as X-Files, Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, or even Twin Peaks, take note here. Nilo Studios launches A Semblance next week for $7.99, and this first-person psychological horror game about being trapped in a never-ending loop of past memories looks really cool. If I was into horror games and they didn't scare the pants off me, this is definitely the kind of title I would pick up. And finally, rounding out the week ending January 23rd is another title by Forever Entertainment for $10 called Omo Tomo, and it appears to be a relaxing puzzle game based on Japanese Zen gardens. All in all, though, that's a pretty solid lineup this week. With that overload of missed releases and over a dozen games on the 23rd alone, there's plenty to check out, even if there's a bit of shovelware crowding out the potential hidden gems. I'm definitely most interested in 1980X, but there's something for fans of party games, first-person horror, and as usual, there are plenty of adventure games and visual novels. We've even got a re-release of an original Xbox game. Can't say that one very often. Oh, and don't forget about Puzzles and Dragons, because that series is massive in other countries, but it's largely ignored in the US despite being a really fun puzzle game that is definitely best played on handheld systems that have a touchscreen like the Switch or the 3DS. What are you picking up? Let me know over on Twitter at Nindie Nation, and thanks to those of you who do throughout the week. But with the new releases out of the way, you know what time it is. That's right, get out your virtual wallets and prepare to throw them at the Switch, friends, because there are currently 174 games on sale, and quite a few $1 games worth checking out. So let's head on over to the eShop and see what's on sale this week. The publisher Cubic Games currently has a 90% off sale for a bunch of games until February 6th. The standouts for me include Coffee Crisis for $2, Mini Trains, a fun little train puzzle game for $1, Shipped, a recently released multiplayer boat battling game. It's got like 7 different modes and games within it, and it's only $3. Rhymelands, Hammer of Thor, is a barbarian-themed turn-based RPG for $2.50, and Get Me Outta Here for $2.49, which is a fast-paced 2D arcade arena shooter with a hilarious premise about a dude who gets abducted by aliens. It's really fun. Flashback is a classic cinematic platformer which is very divisive among gamers, but I really like it. The remaster includes brand new visuals as well as the original title and is 60% off for $7.99. Gunman Clive HD Collection includes 2 awesome games with a beautiful art style like you have never seen. And both are fun, classic 2D action games that will last you probably an hour or so each. The collection is currently $2, which is half off, and this is one I can recommend to just about anyone. Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime is one of the best 2-player co-op games there is. It really is cooperative. You split up tasks like manning a turret or piloting the ship so that you can both do different jobs while also fighting off monsters and trying to make it back home. It's very cute, very approachable, really fun, and is a really, really good game to play with someone who maybe doesn't play a ton of other video games. And this week, it's half off for $7.49. As I mentioned earlier, Puzzles & Dragons launches this week and is currently 33% off for $9.99. A great price for a game that could potentially last you dozens, if not hundreds of hours. And Bard's Gold is still 74% off for $2.24, but only until January 22nd, and that's the price I paid for it. We just published a Let's Play of it and really enjoyed this simple 2D roguelike, and I've been playing quite a bit of it since publishing the video, and I'm still really digging it. The Office Quest is a very silly point-and-click adventure game about the monotony of working in a traditional cubicle desk job. It's heavily discounted and very much worth trying it out at its current 85% discount for only $1.79. Super Hyperactive Ninja is a really fun, fast-paced action game about a ninja who needs his coffee, and it's 75% off also for $2.24. Personally, I love the Gunman Clive collection, and I think Bard's Gold is at just the right price. Cubic can be a hot and cold publisher, but all of the games that I listed are ones I personally like, and you can't beat 95% off. If there's a non-gamer in your house, don't forget, especially if it's a significant other who you'd like to try to get into gaming, Lovers in a Dangerous Spacetime is a great way to do just that. But let me know what you're picking up. Even though the deals aren't quite as hot as they've been recently, we've still got plenty to pick from. If I missed anything, let me know, and as always, if there are any killer midweek deals, you'll always find me posting about them on Twitter at Nindie Nation. And with that, citizens, we find ourselves at the end of episode 52 of Nindie Nation. Next week continues a stream of great new releases with a couple of big titles I've been waiting on for quite a while. In the meantime, go check us out on YouTube for some new Let's Plays of Bard's Gold, and as I promised last week, within a couple of days, you'll see Squidlet and or Super Crush KO, as well as the Nintendo Village's favorite Nindies feature. Speaking of Nintendo Village, none of Nindie Nation is possible without them, so if you're in the mood for some fantastic Nintendo-related media, go check them out on YouTube for weekly shows like P-Myth Gaming and Mario Maker Mondays, or over on their website for daily news, reviews, and fun feature articles. Everything the Village makes can be found at thenintendovillage.com. Thanks again for listening, for your interaction and support on Twitter and YouTube, and for telling your friends about Nindie Nation. There's a lot of great stuff coming between now and next week's episode, and I can't wait to see you back here next week for episode 53. Until then, friends, whether you're puzzling, platforming, or multiplayer partying, Nindie Nation is here to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.